I'd love to introduce my dear friend, Dr. Lawrence Brock. We're here at the University of Bridgeport in the process of living and dying class. We've been talking a lot about reincarnation, near-death experiences, and here is the guru. So,
it's funny. I have been involved with the type of thing you were talking about, and I did have a near-death experience, and it's funny because I want to start and ask if any of you have any questions before I start to talk. Okay. So it was nice that Donna asked me to do this. It's something happened when I was around 20 years old, so I'm 63 now, so it's many years ago. And I haven't really thought about it that much, so it was kind of fun to go back but I did spend many years after that experience learning and studying a lot of things about death and all the stuff you were talking about. So I did have, I was young and doing things that probably shouldn't be doing. I went to a party and I knew I was too high to drive home, and I actually had a friend of mine drive me home, and as I almost got there, I actually was living in Colorado at the time, and I was back visiting my parents and went to a party of high school friends, and when I almost got home, I realized my sister needed the car the next day, and unfortunately I had taken some drugs that didn't kick in before that. I actually got a ride home because I knew the woman that was having a party I was trying to court, and so I left my car there knowing I could go. I had to go back, and so I would see her the next day. So I had my friend drive me back, and I didn't make it home. So I drove into this giant tree, and if you would see the car, it was so smashed you would never believe that I lived. Of course, on the tree there was this little tiny dent. But I had an experience where I saw myself leaning against a tree and a cop kneeling over me, and it wasn't so much as like going into the white light as everything was like white light, and it just felt really nice. And then I heard this voice say, "Your father wants you to go back." So I just said, okay, like it was nothing. And then so I went back into my body and woke up 3 days later in the hospital.
Sort of like Ben Alexander.
Yeah. And so I had always been kind of intuitive about things and what's going on with people, more emotionally than knowing stuff, but that really increased after that time. The other thing, I started to meet a lot of people that had similar experiences, like group studying, spiritual things, and metaphysical healing. I also, during that time, and I still have some of that, I still have that ability, my hands get very warm when I touch people, and a lot of healing takes place. I actually had to learn how to hold back in doing that. I had an experience where I helped this woman. She hadn't slept through the night in years and years. And I told her I could help her. And she was a friend. I was married at the time. She was a friend of my wife. I said, just come over at night and you can stay in the spare bedroom and I'll do my thing and you'll sleep. And I did it. I just put my hands on her and it starts to feel really warm and everything. And the person feels warmth moving through their body. And she slept through the night. And I thought, wow, this is the greatest thing in the world. But the thing that I learned is she was very angry at me after that. And it seems kind of funny, like, why would she be angry? It's like, but I learned that sometimes people aren't supposed to be healed, basically. And that's been a lot of my journey.
So people aren't supposed to be healed.
Well, in the way that I think what healing is, like you would think in her case, sleeping through the night would be healing, but something in her, I could sort of guess what it was, that she was connecting to things deep inside that were disturbing to her, or whatever she would do in her dreams that wasn't supposed to happen. Again, that's just a guess. I had a few other experiences like that. So I've learned a lot of acceptance about things. Another thing, so I started studying all sorts of alternative healing techniques, massage, all sorts of energy balancing things on the body, crystals. I even started doing some biofeedback stuff. There's, in my world, there's a certain like holistic perception about it. And some of that is a lot of people that are in that world are sort of against traditional medicine. And I've learned not to do that because of what I can see spiritually. Sometimes it's just the right thing. You were talking about karma. People have different karma, and everyone is living in their karma. So everything is about your karma. The good things, the bad things, what you think, what you like, everything has something to do with something from another lifetime. There's no doubt in my mind about that whatsoever. So when you can, sometimes people come out of their karma, and those are people who are normally really depressed. And it's, when I look, so I see things about people. When that happens, there's like no colors there. There's nothing going on there. And they've decided, because of some trauma that hurt them, they've decided to basically default on this lifetime. And on the big picture, it doesn't matter how many lifetimes you take, but those people with those lives. Actually, I have a client now that happened with, and it's kind of cool, because she had been on medication, seeing psychiatrists, psychologists, doctors, and one of her psychologists is a friend of mine, and she sent her to me. And now she's like, I keep saying, wow, you're like a normal person. She goes, I know what you mean. It's kind of cool. Any questions at this point about these things? Yes?
Do you have like an exact job title at this state? Like, is this like your career?
It is my career. I don't have an exact, I keep trying to make things up. Well, spiritual counseling. I'm a minister of ministerial counseling, but it's, oh, that reminds me. So everyone seems to have a sense of this stuff, and then we try to use our mind to label it. Even talking about past lives, in one way, there's no way to prove that. I mean, I see things, I say things to people, and they just go, wow, that is, just affects, they know it's kind of true. And then people say, well, what if it's just all in your head? I go, it doesn't really matter. If you're feeling better and doing better, so there's, in getting the information, it's like you got to put your mind, sort of hold it way back. And there's a point you don't know, 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 you don't know. And then all of a sudden you know in a way that's like, wow, I really know it. But our mind wants to right away come in and go, it's a past life, or it's this, or, or even talking about our soul and our spirit, there's, different levels of our consciousness that come through. Yes?
So you can like see people's auras?
Sometimes. Everything is sort of sometimes for me. I can tell you some cool things that really happened that everyone thinks is kind of cool. When I was, actually this was before my near-death experience, I was at the movies, and my grandfather had passed away some years before. A very unique looking man. He was like 6'3", 350 pounds. And he always wore a cowboy hat and cowboy boots and a super nice suit. And in those days, now it wouldn't be so unusual to wear the cowboy stuff, but in those days, no one did. And his spirit was sitting in the front seat of the movie. And he looked as real as you do. A lot of times I see things, you can sort of tell that it's not physically real because it's sort of looks like what people, I don't want to say ghost because that's a whole different thing, but it looks, sort of transparent. So. Yeah, yes.
You said you didn't wake up until 3 days after?
I was unconscious for 3 days, yeah.
So where were you?
My body was in the hospital. I don't really remember much spiritual stuff going on right then. That reminds me, a TV show that was very true to my experience, some of the episodes, was The Dead Zone. Do you know that? It's a Stephen King book. It was made into a movie. I didn't really like the movie very much, but the story is this guy was in a car accident. He was unconscious for 3 months. It just, when he woke up, he realized that one of the nurses there, her house was on fire. And he said something, and she went home and it saved her kids. Obviously that's fictional, but the way that he's sort of guessing, it's sort of like you guess, and then you I get it, and then I can feel whether it's accurate. Sometimes I'm talking to someone, and for some reason this one time came up, I kept hearing say ice cream. And what I was talking about had nothing to do with ice cream. So I've learned to just listen to that. And I said to the person, there's something about ice cream. They go, oh, you know. So she had been fighting with her boyfriend about ice cream.
So like a medium.
Well, a medium usually has to do with people in your family, which again, sometimes happens, but it's not like I'm channeling people from family.
Question, Dominic? Any thoughts?
So everyone has the experience of intuition about something, okay? There's sometimes you just know things. I mean, I guess the common thing people say is you might know someone's going to call you. Okay, so there is something, again, however you explain it depends on your beliefs that you choose or your religion, whatever that is. I try to work outside of that. For a while, I worked with a lot of people that study the Kabbalah. And
Yeah, like you say, everyone has a connection.
yes,
I believe I have a huge connection with my mom.
okay,
We share the same thing, and we know when we're gonna call, we know when we're gonna
Yeah.
arrive. We know already, like, I feel her all the time, and oh, she's coming. I don't know from what, and then she's calling me on my door, like, she's down there.
right,
So we have like that, sometimes it's like the umbilical connection, but I believe more than that, that it's, you can feel the presence of someone too.
right, because not every
Not
child has that
everyone.
with their parents, and
Right.
like sometimes, surprisingly, parents, like, someone once said to me, sometimes kids are almost allergic to their parents.
Or you're thinking and
Yeah.
and I'm thinking with her, and then I receive like in seconds,
Me
a
too.
call from her. So I'm just like, oh, I was thinking about you.
Okay.
So it's very.
So there are all these different levels. So when you're talking about that, so this is, and these levels have lots of different names, but the thing that I sort of like, there's the physical, emotional, mental, astral, causal, etheric, and soul level. It doesn't really matter what these levels are called. And again, everyone sort of has these experiences. Everyone knows there's emotions versus thoughts, and those are different
And
levels.
sometimes I feel like, no, it's my experience. I
Yeah.
can tell because sometimes when I'm sometimes feeling so anxious, so nervous, and I call my mom, and maybe she's having like a problem or something that's going on. I said, oh, maybe that's why I was channeling that
Yeah.
emotion to me. Like
Yeah.
maybe she was feeling distress, and I feel it, and I call her, and she said, no, something happened to me right now, and that's why I'm like,
Yeah,
something like that.
Rattled.
those are cool things.
Cool, but sometimes like scary.
That's a good example of different levels of intuition. We had a girl who was in this class who really felt that she had intuitive
Yeah,
abilities.
That's my case.
yeah, that's a good thing. So what I was saying was, so you have a level here that is a little blocked, so it's actually starting to open up, which is good. So there's, and some of it is just letting you know that that's not that unusual. I mean, even in business. So I have this client who's one of the wealthiest people in the world. And when it comes to money, he is like, you're saying, he just knows things. And I even say to him like that, what's that thing that makes you more successful? He has a business degree from Harvard. He's very smart, but a lot of people do. But he makes billions of dollars. They're making millions, which is a lot, but it's, so he has that connection with business. You know, he just is, he's one of the only, I mean, I know some very wealthy people, but he is, I've never seen him be uptight about money. It just is like his thing. You know. I also learned a lot when I was young. I was in a family electrical contracting business, and some of these electricians, it was amazing what they could fix and what they could do, and they were tuned into that. Okay, so there are all sorts of things, and most people have something. But we just, when you're educated in an area, we attribute it to that rather than the extra, whatever we're talking about.
Like my grandfather passed away, but before that, we knew everybody he was sick.
Yeah.
And my mother was over there. And I was driving and suddenly I smelled like roses and I saw like flowers in front of me, like I was driving, like a daydreaming. I said, and I feel anxiety, and then I called my mom to mom, what's going on? Oh, my father passed away just
Wow.
recently. So I got that emotion from her. Like I saw flowers, I saw like the smell of roses on my whole car.
Yeah.
I was like, this is not right. Something is happening. So
Right, so there's that part that's similar to what goes on for me. I see
Yeah.
things. I mean, it's, you know,
great.
I'm working with people, so it's about
Very
them.
scary.
And, well, you don't have to be scared.
No,
That's
but
the
it's
thing, yeah.
scary because of the
It is.
moment that you don't expect that. Like you're driving and then suddenly come like a
Yeah.
vision of that. Like
So, yeah, you sort of get used to it. That's what I'm saying.
I
Yes.
just want to go back to what you were
Okay.
saying about your accident.
Yes,
So you said that when the accident happened, you remember a police officer being over you,
Yes.
right? And you said you heard someone say, "Father, tell
Just-
you."
this
can't go
big
back.
voice, you know.
So that voice doesn't it doesn't kind of like, how can I say? Do you think that you know that person's voice? Do you just, or it was just a voice you just didn't know?
It was a voice I didn't know. I assumed at that time, and
Okay.
you know, that it was a voice of spirit or God or whatever. And I mean, there are all sorts of spiritual beings around, actually. You know, things like angels, Jesus Christ, all the saints, you know, those people are available. Sometimes little animals even come. That's not that huge.
Well, we talked about that near-death experience and the pattern, the same things that are happening. Seeing the light, feeling the warmth, feeling love, feeling supported and loved.
It just felt like everything was okay beyond
Yeah.
what you could imagine.
Right,
Just
and there's no
like-
labeling anymore.
When I look back, I think, geez, if I knew, I wouldn't have gone back into my body. But when I heard that voice, it was like everything just, oh yeah, of course, everything's okay. You know, so, but no, I mean, that can be a creepy thing to say. So I have, okay, so one time I usually work with people on the phone, which people find kind of intriguing. One time this woman had a session with me and she had arthritis. Basically, her body was hurting her for like 10 years, almost everywhere in her body. And I said, you know, what I say to people when they're not quite believers, I say it's worth it to give it a try. You know, spend a couple $100 and you'll see most people know something's happened. So she had actually been to some other people that do sort of what I do. And I said to her, there's an Indian guide, like American Indian guide with you. And she goes, yeah, someone told me that. And she was very afraid. And I said to her, I basically said, no, this spirit is there to help you. And she goes, really? And you could just hear in her tone of voice, and I could see what I'm seeing. So within seconds, all of a sudden, her body felt better. And I spoke to her up to like 3 years after that, or heard from her, and she was doing fine since then. Very cool things happen. Let's see. One other time, when I was living in Tinton Falls, which is in New Jersey, near where I live now, I went into my house and there was this extremely beautiful woman sitting at the dining room table. And this was one of the times it looked as real as seeing a person. But I knew that this was not a good thing. So there's procedures to do. There's the saints of the different religions are all very powerful in the spirit levels. So I just asked for support from that. And then this person went away, but it was like, you know, as she sort of left, I could just feel the chill of the cold going by. But it was one of the things that looked very solid. Let's see what else. So you talked to them about the different books that I mentioned to you and stuff, or?
No, I never had a chance
Okay.
to do it.
So when I Not that long after that happened, I met this man called Rashad Field, which I didn't know. I was just looking him up and preparing for this, and he passed away a few years ago. But he's the first person that I learned a lot of spiritual, metaphysical stuff, and a lot of it was about learning about dying. So he wrote these two books. He wrote a number of books, but one is called The Invisible Way. And it's nice because it's in story form, but it has some of the things that he learned in his journey. The other one is The Last Barrier and The Invisible Way. He wrote other books, but both of those I really like because they're in story form. And it's very appealing. It's very easy to read. A lot of what he learned, he had studied in two different schools of teaching. One is Sufism, which is the part of Islam, and so the metaphysical part of Islam. And he, in a particular sect of that called the Mevlevi Dervishes, which those are the teachings of Jalaluddin Rumi, that a lot of people know who Rumi is because he's a poet also. He writes a lot of great love poems. But even in there, he talks a lot about all the people that I met that had near-death experiences, they become very spiritual, wanting to learn about that. Okay, and there's a part of letting go of the physical level in order to connect to the spiritual level. What Jalaluddin Rumi wrote about a lot is that each day is dying, like dying, not physically dying, but it's letting go of your limitations, letting go of your beliefs. There's a variety of people here. People come from different backgrounds. Like we're talking about religion, each religion has things that keeps it kind of not spiritual in a certain way.
That limit us.
Yeah, that limit us. So they talk a lot about that. The other thing that he studied was called the Fourth Way. And this man, Gurdjieff, who wrote many books, he was a Russian character, let's say, but it's worth looking into him. There was a place in West Virginia called Claremont. There was a school, like a college level school, based on his teachings that I went to one time. It was a little, it was good. It was a little too serious for me. And, so my doctorate is in something called spiritual science. And basically what we did was use the scientific process to check whether things that are considered spiritual are good for you. Okay, so we had to track like 50 different things through school for the master's program, 3 years of the doctorate, and then 3 years of, I forget what it was called, the other 3 years. But, so it'd be like, what's it?
Treatise, is that when you wrote?
No, the treatise, that was a whole nother thing. But so we had to keep track of practical things like how much you slept, how much water you drank, your diet, also meditation, doing visualizations, all these things like that. And you would keep track of when you did them each day, and then there would be like a cause and effect. So you would try to come up with, if I meditated, 15 and a half minutes per day, I was happier. Or if I slept this amount, I felt better. So it is trying to use the scientific method to prove things that we're saying, do you believe in this? It's like, well, this is trying to move past believing in it and make it something actually practical.
So what about reincarnation?
Yeah, okay. So when I work with people, I see things from other lifetimes. So yes, definitely reincarnation. The thing that I think is a little different is we do have different levels of our consciousness that can participate in different things. So there's our very physical energy that is different from our soul. Our soul just keeps going and going. After we die, our soul goes into like sort of it's like a school, or just a bunch of souls are there, and then you sort of learn what you have to if you need to come back for something. Okay, there's something called the basic self that sometimes is separate from the soul. Okay, so you were talking about little kids. probably most little kids until they're around 7 have some memories of past lives, but they are not taught that. They're taught that it's their imaginary friend or whatever
Exactly.
that is, that, and then around 7 years old, something happens that some people call the veil drops, and we don't have that awareness of the spiritual stuff so much, for most people. Yes,
I'm sorry, I have a lot of questions.
that's okay, go ahead, yeah.
So we were just talking about reincarnation.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I just totally lost my thought.
That's okay.
What was I gonna say? Okay, so you're saying that you can see in people like they've been reincarnated? Or
Yes.
like, do you, by like looking at them, like by energy wise, or are we talking about like, let me touch your hand real quick.
Well, I work with people on the phone mostly, so the touching hand thing is not
Okay.
necessary, but the answer is yes to all those things maybe. So it's, so there's a whole lot of this of what I call the spiritual unknowing that you need to understand. So we're trying to define it, and it's
Label.
not definable. Okay, there's a thing called, if you can put your finger on it, it's not it. So you have to be real soft in there, and it's like, oh, what do I see? And you sit back and you keep your mind back, and it's like, oh, this is what I see. You don't really know what it means, and if you keep waiting and waiting and waiting, sometimes at some point you know what it means. And then, but in what I do, I'm looking for certain healing to take place with people, either emotionally or physically. And when that happens, then the information part doesn't really matter that much. Sometimes people come to me and try to stump me, or they've gone to someone else and they ask about something about a past life.
And have you worked with children, like younger children?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, and I know that I'm doing that on my project
Uh-huh.
next week, but what are some of the things that you've heard from your child, that you would help them with their healing process?
Well, a lot of times the children, there's things about dreams. I worked with this kid. I think he's probably about 16 now. I mean, severely autistic, and it was hard. And he's still, I don't know where. I haven't spoken to his mother in a long time. So he would come, and he was like a mad genius. I mean, I thought of like someone like Mozart with him. That's what the image I saw was, and that's how I got the information that he saw like Mozart. So he would do artwork and be on the computer obsessively. And basically, he was struggling with his teachers, his parents, his doctors. They were just trying to keep him away from the computer. And I could say, no, you need to teach him how to use the computer. And it was kind of cool, because then if you would see the artwork he did, it was really quite miraculous. To him, it was something, you know what I mean?
Did he have Asperger's? Asperger's?
No, he was severely
Really?
autistic. Yeah, it was hard for him to even talk. And,
Wow.
I saw him over a period of years. Just a couple of times he even looked at me. He was
Really?
mostly talking to his mother.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of sad. Just, again, you see, what I like to think is whatever anyone is doing, like whatever you have an attraction to or a draw to, there's something in there good. Okay, there's something in there about clues of what your karma is. And then it's like, how do you use that in a positive way? Sometimes these things are like that kid. There was something in him that the computers were very important to him, and it really made a difference. I saw this woman some years ago, and she was on a lot of medication, very depressed, and basically she had gone out with this guy who was not the best guy. He liked to go out with other women and stuff, and but I saw very clearly that there was no way she was going to live in this lifetime without. I said, you need to not listen to those people. You need to come up with a plan to get this guy, and you need to understand that. And the truth is, it didn't really matter to her whether he was going out with other women, which to me, I don't understand, but I could see that was very clear for her. So she was a client for a while. She's married to him now and happy, and he stopped going out with other women after a while too, which is kind of cool. So, but, you know, when I see someone, whatever it is, there's something in there. You just have to figure out how to do it in a way that isn't, you know, socially somewhat acceptable and, you know, is healthy. Yes. Okay. Okay.
Do you see like people you know that have died?
Well, I saw my grandfather. I mean, that was really very clear. I normally, not, I would say. But again, it's, some of it is what's for me, even with this guy, Rashad, everything I would ask him, he would always say, you don't need to know that. And it was frustrating, but there is this thing of not knowing, so then I can know anything. So, I don't know how that answers your question. So I have seen sometimes, okay, someone that I knew, his brother committed suicide. And it was kind of disturbing because he was a friend of mine. I said to him, you know, your brother, it'd be good if your brother had a session with me. I knew something was up. And he said, no, he didn't want to do it. And I said, you should talk to him. I don't know if the brother wanted to do it, but this guy didn't want to do it. You know, he was sort of a friend. And even though he's a friend, he wasn't that into the kind of stuff I do. And then he committed suicide. And usually when someone commits suicide, it's very disturbing in the afterlife or whatever. But for this person, it wasn't that disturbing for some reason. So he came to me to tell his brother. So sometimes I see that.
Oh. So
Yes.
like,
Yes.
I asked that because like, when I get into like really deep intuitive moods,
Yeah.
I can see like people I've known
Okay,
that
yeah.
have died before. Like when my mom's like really, really sad and then I feel her grief, her first husband, I'll see him like in the room with us.
Okay, yeah, so those are cool things. So as I was saying, there's the basic self. The basic self, a lot of people call it the lower self, even though it's more in charge of the physical level, it's still quite a majestic healer. So when you're doing that, you're seeing things from the basic self. There's a high self also that's more up here that you could, like right now, just focus there. I'll open that up for you and those things can look clearer. Okay. So you're seeing things that look not as high vibration as you'd like, right? So, yeah. So you can let this higher energy come in and that can, there you go. So that just sort of connected inside of you and that's a very cool thing. Again, you want to understand that our mind's always coming in trying to make some reference to the physical level. The real feel of things in the spirit is just like everything is good and you're loved beyond your imagination. So that is always there. Whenever these things are coming in, there's some message in there of what there is for you to learn and to know that God loves you or that you're loved. If you don't believe in God, it doesn't really matter.
Gemma.
So like with everything you've been saying that you do, like
Yes.
that you've been able to heal somebody
Yes.
or like